It's impressive. You kept the form factor with all that in there.
Yep, it barely works. The last reverb tank comes to the very back.
It barely works.
That's how many designs have you had? I feel like I've said it barely works. Hi everyone, I'm here with two of my favorite people, Chris Benson and Robert from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma City.
Edmond?
Edmond, used to be Edmond for the past 20 years. Now I moved right across the border back into Oklahoma City.
I'm really excited for these products that we designed. By now you've probably heard of this Beach Boys pedals and gear thing going on here with Sweetwater and the documentary that's been released by Disney. Probably a couple years ago, I got called in as kind of a, I hate to say project manager because I would destroy it if I was that. It was more like, hey, Josh, we want to do this thing. There's a documentary. They reached out, put some friends together and make some stuff that ties back to the Beach Boys legacy, sonically, technologically, all that stuff. So I immediately was like, Chris Benson, Robert Keeley. Nothing got scratched on our end. How about your end? Did everything feel pretty straight ahead?
Yeah.
Your idea actually worked? That's what I'm getting at, yeah.
It was pretty cool in that we had been working on the rotary sound. And so we had a lot of good ideas that we could put together and then make it really fit this Beach Boys thing.
So yeah, the idea was imagine 1966. Beach Boys are in East West Studio or something, and maybe these could be laying around. Maybe you see this in the back. And we had to think about aesthetically what that feels like historically and kind of a little bit of role playing there, which is always fun. And then the sounds, we needed to do things that sounded like the Beach Boys. So I guess the first place to start, I found it interesting that people generally don't think about the Beach Boys as like a Guitar Hero band.
No.
But they are massively important, especially in evolution of guitar sound. When you think spring reverb, you would, in my head, or most people, you go back to Leo Fender. And we know that Leo Fender leased that from Laurel Hammond, and they got it from Bell Labs for telephone communication tuning. So there's this crazy thing with spring reverb being used and creating surf rock. What was it like digging into that?
It was cool. I mean, I've always liked the classic 60s kind of reverb heads, and it was very different from the stuff that, Benson has released. It was fun to take that type of circuit.
I'll hold it.
Thank you. It was fun to take that kind of circuit and kind of revisit it, fix some things that I have always bugged me about the originals. So the original one has a super high output impedance, the way they mix the reverb and the dry signal. If you use like a longer cable, it'll kind of suck tone, as they say. Mm-hmm. So I just put a tube output buffer on it so it can drive long cables. So I wanted to keep the original sound, so it took some like simulation software and everything to kind of maintain all of that and then also have like the high quality output. So this mix knob, I incorporated like an Echoplex style mixture to it so you can go all dry, all wet. And then I stuck the big amp, like optical tremolo in this one as well. And I made the oscillator go really, really slow, really, really fast. So I extended the range of that using a 3-pole oscillator. Then we were getting that ticking sound that you get from like a Fender sometimes.
Yeah.
And
what Fender amp would people be familiar with?
Like a Twin or Super Reverb, Deluxe Reverb, basically anything but a Princeton or Vibro Champ. It uses the photocell, which is like a neon lamp and an LDR, and as the lamp goes off with the oscillator, it shunts frequencies to ground. And that's how it works. But we were getting that ticking sound. So I started diving into why that was happening. And I actually found if you put like a layer of electrostatic film between the lamp and the LDR, that sound is basically static electricity just flashing into the signal path. That actually blocks all of it. So
starting to feel like I did nothing.
The whole time I'm like, what am I going to say to make myself?
This is just so fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah. But I was basically able to like do everything that I wanted to do with this type of unit.
Your reverb has always been my favorite one for like true spring. And getting to work with this all day yesterday and this morning, it's on so many things.
It could be a stroke of genius or just a stroke. Today's gonna be a day full of setting my drink down and forgetting where I set it. Yep.
It's God only knows, but creepy.
None of us have made a single mistake today. Damn it. We lost the snare.
And we're gonna win a Grammy. You already were great at this, but maybe this is like your Yoda moment of spring reverb.
We were asked to kind of use, you know, the Beach Boys as inspiration. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Obviously, they use spring reverb and plate reverb and all this stuff. And I was talking to my buddy about it, and he was like, well, you know, one of the production techniques that they used was blending two different instruments playing the same types of lines as a production. Well, what if I just blend two different reverb tanks together? So the 6v6 in here is pushing two different tanks, and you can blend between them. One's like a short 3-spring tank, which sounds kind of more diffuse and like shorter. And
So that's what the blend is?
yeah.
I didn't know
Isn't
that.
that killer?
So one sounds like the classic 2-spring long tank, which is like the surf sound. Our reverb unit's like the shorter one with the 3-spring, which kind of gets out of the way a little quicker. So you could blend between them, and I think that turned out pretty cool.
Amazing. So the Surf's Up Guitar Effects Unit by Benson. All right, Robert, let's start with these.
We had a
So-
blast with these. You told me essentially what I had to design.
Well, I knew I couldn't do these.
Right.
I know my limits. I know what we're good at JHS. I was like, I can't do these. This is above my pay grade in this category. Robert.
Yeah.
And so that's how you ended up with these two. This is actually phenomenal.
That sounds like traveling Wilburys.
So I hope you enjoyed doing it.
Oh, well, then the ante was brought up even more because James relays the fact that he's got a buddy that designs pedals for a very, very big company out there, and they didn't pass on the idea, but he's well versed in these effects and what they should sound like. So then that puts the stress level up there quite a bit when you're designing for an engineer that is well versed in these sounds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's no faking it. And doing a 12-string is a very hard thing to do, period.
Let's start with the rotary.
Sure.
Rotary is one of these things where there's fights on the internet about good rotary and can it be done. And I also just want to say the form factor is really cool. I've loved seeing your DSP game in the last few years, your team, it's amazing. We have true stereo in and out.
Yep.
We've got dual foot switches. The form factor is amazing. Yeah, and these are not easy effects. So I guess starting with the rotary was the first chorus pedal for a guitar, I guess.
Exactly.
So you had to go back in time and
Right.
you're digitally recreating
That
a
Doppler
mechanical effect.
Yeah, exactly. So that there's that tweeter that's spinning around or the horn that's spinning on top, and then the baffle kind of does that. You get a very syrupy type of sound when you're in the room listening to this thing pushing the sound around the room. And that's the challenge in creating this type of effect, because you can make a chorus type of sound, but it's not going to accomplish
Yeah,
what
like you can grab a Boss C2, crank
Right.
it up, and it's like, that's a Leslie. It's like, not really.
Because we got to play in our new enclosures and with a little bit more space, we could have stereo in and stereo out. One element that we wanted to try to create, and that is we stacked 3 different drive circuits so we could simulate a very softly broken up tube. And this thing is really actually pretty dynamic. You put a TV Jones type of pickup to it and it doesn't really have a lot of breakup, but if you put a really hot P90 to it, you've got a great range of gain.
We were using, we had a telly, we had a baritone. It was different with every kind of guitar. We had a 335. And then one of my favorite uses on the track was we hooked the Wurlitzer up through it, stereo. And it all had a different character.
It does have a different character in stereo. The way we have the DSP set up so that there's a separation between the channels is a lot of fun. You can use the slow fast to get you 2 different speeds too. So
the ramp feels really good.
Yes, and you can preset that. So if you want something that's more of a preset change, then you can set it for a quick ramp speed.
So for all the very nerdy, if you're this far into the video, you're a nerd. Congratulations. Talk about just the realness of designing a ramp like that. What are you having to achieve? Because it is a mechanical unit spinning slowing and like, how do you approach that?
It is interesting because technically on this one, what you do, you can set the slow speed there by holding this down, and you set the ramp speed and the slow speed there. But that process of changing the oscillator from the slow speed there has got to have kind of a vintage feel to it. When we first started experimenting with it, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound very musical. We need something that would, say take place in the space of one measure or something like that, or you want it to end in a certain bar. So we had to kind of create this a logarithmic type of feel to the change because it doesn't happen instantaneously.
So it's almost like it's a preset that fades into the next preset.
Exactly.
That's
the
not
best
easy.
way to say it.
Yeah, that's not easy.
They have a rope pulley.
Yes.
Where the
inside here.
the pulley's slipping. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't change instantaneously on a chorus type of effect. You'll get a very weird sounding glitch in the.
This is definitely something you don't want me designing. There's stuff out there. The Strymon unit's great.
Yep.
There's things that Pigtronics has done a great one over the years. But this, to me, I loved how simple. I love the form factor, the ramp. It's just a great unit, and I think it's a lot of
big knob on there is
the
great.
big knob.
You can change it with your foot on the fly, or use that. Yeah. We had it out to California. James listened to it, and he's like, "That's the sound."
It's killer. I think a fun piece of this, even with our stuff, and we'll jump to your 12-string in a second. You. Not so much because you already live here, which I'm jealous of, but I would say, maybe you did. You can talk about it if you did. The form factor, the look, the imagination of an older unit, it actually influences the user interface, the choices of controls, the simplicity. Like, you're not going to have a pedal that you would see in a photo at a Beach Boys session with an LCD display.
No.
So there's you have to think like you're back there. No, it's almost like, I know what I know now. If I could jump in a DeLorean and go and design, what could I use of theirs to make? It's very interesting. Obviously, they didn't have DSP, but.
We wanted to keep it like there was no DSP involved, like there would just be a simple speed knob and a depth and a blend,
Yeah. In this project, it was interesting how the feeling, the look influenced what we would just say, that's too far, that's too much, that would have never happened, or this, that, or the other. It's really cool. Did you feel that at all, or that's pretty much at home? Because, that's where you live, right?
Yeah. We're pretty much just 1950s technology only.
But you're right, though. Having this assignment to keep things with this theme, make sure that you don't put an LCD screen on there or, a bunch of LEDs.
Those knobs are incredible.
Yeah, the knobs, and then using the amp jewels,
These are kind of the UA knob, the old, is that what this is?
I think we pulled them off some
UA
sort of
and RCA stuff.
RCA stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, a really good thing for creativity is a boundary. You're forced to stop and think differently. Limitation is good for that. Yeah. And this is a good example. All right, 12-string.
Now,
arguably,
this is where it got harder.
It's just hard to do, period.
It's just very hard to do.
You should just explain all of your tiers to us.
So the hard part is the guitar has got a very crazy set of pitches that it puts out. If you hit a note on it, it's a cacophony of noise. It's not anything sinusoidal or pretty at all. So, and that's the build, the beginnings of trying to create an octave above that.
So you're saying if I take a guitar and the D and I hit the D note, it's like the transients and all the stuff.
Yes.
There's a lot more than a duh.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so how do you approach that?
Yeah, you have to kind of take very small time slices and say, yeah, that looks like a D note. That looks like something that would be comparable to a D note. And then you start to run through memory. You load all that in memory, and then you come out playing it twice as fast as it was recorded, which leads to one of the big limitations in the sound quality. Yeah. So we're trying to read it back.
You're grabbing it. Mm-hmm.
And then
recording
reading it back twice as fast.
Double, so it's pitched up.
Yep.
Okay.
A whole bunch of things changes in that fraction of an instant. And the note that you were playing, your fingers moved a little bit, so now the pitch is out of tune with what you're actually playing. So it becomes really hard. And when it's looking at things like you're making a bar chord and your notes are slightly out of tune, well, all the pitch shifting is slightly out of tune. So you can create some big difficulties. It can sound pretty rough. We got it filtered and we got it looking at just a narrow range of all the frequencies that are coming out of the guitar. And we got something that tracks really good. Then it was the great part of this project is working with James and getting people that can direct us and our DSP and our circuits, and they can go, hey, we need something to filter those highs a little bit, and then if you could add a little bit of a slapback echo, around 66 milliseconds, that would simulate that interval between the strings on a 12-string.
Totally.
Then we've got all kinds of possibilities then for making it sound like a 12-string simulator. So that's when we decided to put the slapback echo on the
What
switch
was originally there?
It was just that, as a matter of fact.
Like
it was
a
just
boost?
a mid boost.
Okay.
Again, I think the mid boost was kind of my thing because I wanted this to feel good for guitar players that might have single coil pickups or whatever. And I thought, you know what, if they had a little push there, I think that would be a pretty appropriate thing. On this one, when James suggested adding an echo to it, like days before we had it done, I was like, okay, we can do that. So, now we've got these alt features where you can control the level of the echo.
Oh, cool.
And yes, and it's really, and
cool.
the blend, at any rate, you can have now a very nice 12-string simulator with some slapback echo on there. It's kind of a chorus overall. If you take off the X2, the 12-string factor, then it just resolves to a chorus, and it's actually a brilliant sounding chorus with an echo if you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
My first playthrough was we walked in, and I had watched I kind of knew the functions. I had a Telecaster. I plugged into this Twin. I played like a little arpeggiated, and it was like Tom Petty, like instant
right?
Tom Petty.
How cool.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Like, this is obviously a Beach Boys thing, but this project, and even with Iconic and the Beach Boys, when they called this whole thing, can we do this? It's more of a project, like the Beach Boys is this big focus, and there's this big documentary, but what's really cool is it's like this moment of seeing technology change the guitar. It's a story about rotaries and reverbs. And like the Beach Boys is a really good story to show it. But what's fun is like plugging that in. I was like, I just wanted to play Tom Petty, you know? Now obviously 12-string is all over the Beach Boys. It's very prominent, but it's just a good example of these effects. They're still so relevant. I mean, the rotary, how much stuff is there? The verb is on everything nowadays. But that's a really cool thing. And then I didn't have one here for this session, but I was immediately like, I want to plug a tone bender and in front of, like
Exactly.
because there's just so many fun things you can do. Yeah, we got to make these devices, but they go far outside of Beach Boys. But what's fun is just being able to make this quantity of them, and it's a weird release. Like, I don't get to do a lot of that anymore. We're like, here they are. This is a fun project with a documentary, and it's over.
Usually, if we're working together on a project, we're sharing ideas and trying to get to some sort of common sound goal. But it was like, no, you're tasked with individual effects, and
So my two. The punchline. So obviously, if you haven't noticed, these names are Beach Boys references. I Get Around, California Girls, Surf's Up. So Punchline is an obscure Beach Boys track that had been recorded in the early 60s. It's a very surf song, but there's this bass line in there. I don't think it was released until the 90s or something. Anyway, it's the name of a song. The idea here, there is a really important narrative with the Beach Boys and electric bass guitar. We all hear electric bass and it's super normal. It's like, there's nothing that thrilling about thinking about plugging in a P bass. Like, people do this all the time. But when the surf era started, upright bass was still king. You had the development of what we would refer to as like tic-tac basses, which are just baritones. So you had a person playing upright, and that was like the slidey, thumpy sound, but it didn't have a lot of attack. So on a lot of country records, they would start dubbing a baritone electric for the click, and you'd have like two bass devices make the sound. And then Leo Fender, someone had done it a little before him, but Leo Fender mastered the idea and released it, the P-bass. The bass player on the Beach Boys stuff, she basically invented a genre of playing bass. Yeah. And it's kind of a lost story to a lot of people. And then there's a reference for the band that played with the Beach Boys, the Wrecking Crew. So it's a crew of just crazy good musicians that played on a lot of these sessions. So this device, the idea is the Wrecking Crew bass sound. And could we shove it all in?
You did.
And so here you have a giant box that is an all-in-one, put it down on the floor, everything you need for a good bass tone. And just like you can use California Girls to play Tom Petty. The idea is, this will fit every modern bass application. But we did go pretty traditional with the thought of like what's in it. So it kind of starts with a VCA compressor. So 1176-ish, whatever, just a VCA. You have a ratio, threshold, gain. You can put this compressor pre or post. That does wildly different things.
Yeah.
And I did a piece to backtrack a hair. We used it on the bass, along with a Ampeg amp over here, and we'll decide in the mix what goes where. But there was a part where I was like, I really want to do like a fuzzy, like a guitar part, and I don't have any fuzzes, and I wanted to just use these. So I went over to the bass rig, plugged in a guitar, and just made a fuzz out of this, because it's cascading all the gains, so it sounded like a Maserati Fuzzrite or something. But when I was doing that,
cool.
It was nuts how the compressor makes everything else feel. And then you have a drive circuit. This drive circuit has a parallel clean blend, and the idea there is just something really versatile that you can blend parallel in your clean. That obviously goes a lot more modern than what we would think of 60s bass tones, but it's really handy. And that circuit falls somewhere in this strange land of like the Expandora and the Rat, which are really great bass devices. But with the parallel blend, you can do like some of that desk distortion that was very popular in the 60s. And you can also just add a little dirt, which those circuits, the way this is tweaked, sounds a lot like a tube distorting. Amp sim was fun. We've never done this. This was a non-DSP, fully analog amp sim. So it was like, just started digging back into, obviously there's legends in this world. Like you have the SansAmp stuff. There's so many people who've done this well over the years. So this is just our take on like, at that time, her bass tones, a lot of it's like a super reverb Fender, the Ampeg stuff. So it's like a cleanish Fender Ampeg valve sound amp sim, meaning you can set this down and go DI out. You can do parallel if you want, but you can go DI out and you don't need an amp. And you can turn it on and off here. The compressor is on and off here. The drive is on and off here. But the amp, you either want it or don't want it. You're not gonna, I didn't see a world where anybody's like, let me turn my amp off. And then the EQ is always on. And this is just a really vintage style back send-all thing, mid, treble bass, just a really great always on part of the channel strip, master volume. I love this. It turned out really great. Essentially, it was designing 4 brand new circuits that in my mind, I'm excited because like one day I'll probably split these off and have individual pedals and maybe do some other version of this later. But for now and for the next several years, this is it. Like we won't be making anything like this anytime soon. So it's really cool.
That's
and
killer.
I beat him on the knob count.
You did. Sounds good to me. Oh, shoot.
That's the most knobs, I think, for JHS. And the look of our stuff, I had a hard time. I love the way stuff looks. And I just kind of landed in this weird world of like, I was picturing like a Japanese kind of company. Like I was thinking like Shin Univox stuff, the Royal Fuzzes, just like weird, obscure Japanese looking black with white font. A lot of that stuff would have had like the metal plates on it.
Yeah.
But this was, I wanted them to match. That's where our aesthetic kind of came from. These knobs, if you notice, these are like the British orange amp knobs, kind of from the 60s. That's that. And then good vibrations. This might be my favorite effect of all time. The vibrato setting on an actual bulb-driven Univibe. I've had an old thing called the Warbletron, which I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like cloning what I thought, and then I learned it was horrible. It actually sounds good, but it's like when you're making, you ever made something and you're not even sure how it works?
Yes.
Yeah, so most people have. So this was a fun thing because we did that, and then we had the Unicorn, which like really stepped up. We added tap in the JHS line to a Univibe, and that was a really fun thing. But I really just like a simple Univibe pedal. So we started from the ground up, bulb-driven, kind of like you're talking with the, similar to that optic, that optic element where there's a LDR seeing a bulb. This is a really well-made, thought-out, really good sounding traditional vibe.
It sounds amazing. I was playing it earlier.
Oh.
It's the thing where like, and I've been through this because I love Univibes so much. I made them fancy, I've added digital, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I just want the 3 knobs. Like I would actually delete this switch and just have the vibrato. There's something really pure about it that's fun. Good vibrations, obviously.
Is it hard to get the lope and the feel of the oscillator exactly right, or is that the magic of doing it optically? Or
Yeah, the trick The trick with this, and again, I love referencing internet forum fights. You get into the world with builders, and I understand it where you're like choosing each individual photo cell and this and the LDRs, and I get all that. Kind of find the part that works. The tolerances on those parts are pretty vast, and what that means is you buy a bunch of bulbs or you buy a bunch of light dependent resistors that are sensing the bulbs. They're not ever what they say they are. They're very all over the place. So a lot of the arguments on Univibe is, you know, I saw the Hendrix when we took it apart. And
We measured it.
There's a dragon's toenail in there, and we measured that bulb. So that bulb resistance or whatever, you kind of end up, that's one path, and that's a fine path if you have time. I do not have time for that, and I need to make 1,000 of these. So it's like getting that circuit to work really good with the tolerances. And then there's fun stuff here, like on the original Warbletron I used to make, you have the light bulb and you have the sensor. Well, you actually have a bulb in the middle and you have 4 sensors around it. And that bulb is doing this, and the sensors are kind of like, it's like a UFO space.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you need to cover it. You need to have like a cover on the light so that it's all there. On the Warbletrons, I think one of the reason that Warbletron this sounds better to me now, but I even struggled with liking my Unicorn a little bit. We use these copper plumbing caps, 1-inch pipe cap.
Yeah.
So a copper, like we went to the hardware originally, and then I found them online, and we just buy like 1,000 pipe caps. And you should put it on, you know, and solder it for plumbing, but that's what we use. So on this one, we come up and we kind of did this, it's a real interesting, it's a 3D printed cover that worked really well. Yeah, so it's old tech. You said I make stuff with technology from the 50s. That's part of the fun of, this is so finicky and like, it just wants to mess with you. It's like it's so simple and weird and old that you kind of hate making it in a way, but it's like really fun because it's going to fight you on a production line. You get it on a production line and you're like, I need to make 1,000. You're just ready for the punch. You're going to get punched.
That's truthful, because these knobs, harder to come by and source, and we have to make sure that all the ones that we have are presentable looking. Then when you start to put in bigger things like this, the manufacturing of these vintage type of things is a whole nother level.
He's over here like, oh yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah, but it is wild. Like you've added.
You wouldn't do that for an effects pedal normally.
Yeah,
but for this one,
like you'd be amazed. So you have to now in your manufacturing.
Yes.
I'm justifying cost here if you don't notice. You have to now you have to install this.
Yes.
You normally.
Yeah, we try to get away from that.
You have to order this bulb. Yes. Some of them aren't going to work.
No, that's a 10 millimeter LED. Can you believe it?
Is it?
I know.
Oh,
have you ever seen one that big?
They make these for like pinball machines. That's why that technology. Yeah. They're way less current.
Okay, that's really clever because I see.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so you did it. I'll high five you on that later. That's a good little cheat there. That's awesome. The
Creighton came up with
you're able to board mount an LED.
Yeah.
But yeah, someone's having to do this 2,000 times. Hold on. And
it'll be a lot longer than that because you got to get the back on right. Then Danny's going to come along and say it wasn't torqued.
It's important to like notice, and there's things with imagining, this mechanical or I remember we got into this. Does it have to be a rocker switch?
Yeah.
Like someone, one of the teams like. Is that important? And I was like, because you add the rocker switch and then you've instantly changed the production technique.
That's right.
How long does it take to build this?
Yeah, how long? Are there like 70? Is that how many the target is?
66.
66? So that makes sense.
Yep. So, gosh, this was like 4 whole circuit board revisions.
Which is the year of Pet Sounds. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
All right. It's either that or Mark of the Beast, almost.
Almost.
Right.
This is the first like tube circuit board thing we've ever done, so that was already very difficult. And we didn't want to do like board mounted sockets or anything because it's against my religion essentially. Yeah, there was a lot of difficulties. Like the ticking tremolo thing was like a very obvious like, oh God, I forgot about the ticking. Yeah, that was me. I got to stick something in between these elements. So I think my guy Carson was at the shop with me that one day, and I'm sticking all sorts of things between this bulb and this LDR. At one point, I tried some metal mesh and just shock myself really bad. It was stupid. I was just like, well, technically this should shield some static. It's like, okay, that's not going to work. And then I was like, what's clear and block static? And
Problem solving. How long does it take to build this? So someone comes in, and is it multiple people building on one at this point, or is it one person sitting down?
Normally, the way we build everything is one person sits there and wires an entire amp start to finish. It's kind of this Zen thing. They really enjoy it.
It'd be awesome
because they've made it all the way and they stamp their name on it.
It's like when you mow your lawn and you look back. That feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With this,
you know what I'm talking about.
They hated making these because I made them do assembly line.
Yeah.
And so there's like one day where everyone comes out to my barn and populates circuit boards, and we put it through our dipping machine, and they're just like, this sucks. And of course, I'm on the line there with them.
Yeah.
And they're all just like stressed out because I'm right there building. And then the next day it was like, we did assembly line the wiring, and I'm down in the shop.
No one likes wiring.
I'm on the line, and they're just like,
They're used to sitting there with their true crime podcast.
exactly. Yeah. To answer your question,
That's cool though. That's cool that you're doing it that way.
yeah. So, but it's complicated. Basically, it probably takes like maybe a couple hours to actually wire it, but another half hour to assemble. To do the circuit board, and then there's a final assembly, which is like Jenga, because there's 2 tanks in here. It's pretty small, so there's this like specific process. You got to put the one tank in and RCA cables, and then the other, and then you kind of put this in, but then you have to take it out. It's crazy.
It's impressive. You kept the form factor with all that in there.
Yep, it barely works. The last reverb tank comes to the very back.
It barely
of this.
works. That's
How many designs have you had? I feel like
barely
I've said
worked.
it barely worked. This has been fun.
this has been a blast, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
Forces us to think in different ways.
Yeah, I love. I feel like anything I've ever made that I love is always like some collaborative thing. Like I just love thinking of stuff with people. This is fun because it's individual teamwork of our own teams, but then the whole project is so cool. It's truly 3 different takes on an era and the devices, and the team at Iconic and the Beach Boys crew. They had a lot of good ideas. I need to give big credit for none of this. This was all on the table when I was brought in, and it was just pointing to you guys and then picking my poison here. And it worked out great.
It's actually, like you said, it's really great that we got to work on these specific projects because it forced us to solve certain problems, either with 12-string simulation or the drive sounds in a tube rotary speaker. And I'm sure with Chris, with all the weird sounds of the trim. And hey, that's kind of cool about moving that compressor to the front to the back, because it becomes 2 different instruments almost.
Yeah, and I think I don't know from your perspectives, this is limited, obviously, because of what it is. It's really fun. Limited's not everyone's favorite, but this stuff that we've learned, we'll get to use in our products probably forever. I mean, there's stuff that we learned here that's like,
Definitely.
you'll see it over 10 years, just kind of end up here and there. And I know with your DSP, it's that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed this, and check these out, buy them. I don't know. Yeah, we're really appreciative for anyone who watched through this and is interested in, what it takes to make weird stuff like this on such a interesting, strange project. This has been really fun, and in a small way, getting to tie into the Beach Boys is weird. That's very weird, like listening to Pet Sounds and those records, and having this weird connection to the actual band and the production agency and a Disney documentary. Did you ever think?
No.
No, never at all. Big thanks to Sweetwater for teaming up. Part of my project was, how do I bring myself and the builders I need to bring together to make the products? And how does that work with different companies? Sweetwater stepped in, honestly, with 0 hesitancy and took it over as like the distributor for the project, which saved us all massive headaches, because there's a lot of complicated things with how do you make it, who gets what, who ships it. So huge thanks to Sweetwater, and even for making this content to explain our story. This is the kind of thing we could have done and no one would have even understood it if not told the way that Sweetwater's told it. So big thanks to everyone again for watching, and to Sweetwater. And if you bought this, big, massive, huge thank you. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you, man.
All right, we'll do something else one day.
Please.
Awesome.
All right.